Hey there and welcome to Planet Echoes. Tonight we walk beneath the memory of a falling star. I remember the first time I read the dry line of text buried in a government database. CNEOS 2014-1-8. It looked like any other entry, another forgotten coordinate, a timestamp in the endless record of skyward events. But behind those digits hid a secret that shook my sense of the possible. On that January night, far above the Pacific, something tore through our atmosphere with a speed that seemed to break the very rules of the solar system. It was not simply fast, it was impossibly fast, and the way it burned, the angle it cut, whispered that it may not have belonged here at all. The ocean keeps its silence, but the sky that evening did not. Witnesses scattered across Manus Island spoke of a sudden light that split the heavens, a ball of fire brighter than any star they knew. They did not know they were watching history unfold. For them, it was just a flash, a sound, a fading trail. Yet the data that later emerged told a different story. This was no ordinary meteor. The velocity, over 60 kilometers per second, was so extraordinary that even seasoned astronomers hesitated to believe it. Most meteors are bound by the sun's gravity, locked into looping orbits that eventually cross Earth's path. But this one? Its path was hyperbolic, the trajectory of a traveller not captured but only passing through. That meant it had come from outside, beyond Jupiter, beyond Neptune, beyond even the icy Oort cloud. From another star, another place entirely. The thought unsettled me more than I expected. We spend so much of our lives believing the universe is out there, far away, something glimpsed in telescopes or dreamed about in books. But this was different. If the analysis was right, then the universe had not stayed out there. It had come here, striking our world without ceremony, without announcement, and then vanishing beneath the waves. I couldn't help but imagine the fragments that must still rest on the seabed, tiny shards of a world not our own, lying quiet in the dark pressure of the Pacific. Were they only stone, metal, dust? Or could they carry some deeper story? The chemistry of another system, the fingerprint of an alien star, maybe even the seeds of something alive. The official confirmation came years later, tucked away in military archives. At first it had been doubted. The data locked behind security walls because it came from satellites never meant to reveal their secrets. But eventually, in 2019, word emerged. The velocity readings were accurate. This fireball had indeed moved too fast to be anything but interstellar, and so, quietly, history shifted. Oumuamua and 2 Borisov had already shown us visitors could pass through, elongated rocks and cometary fragments brushing by on their long voyages. But this was different. This one had not just passed. It had struck Earth itself. A messenger from another system, colliding with us like a handshake, too sudden, too violent to ignore. Even now I struggle with the enormity of that thought. The universe is vast beyond comprehension, and yet here was proof that its fragments do not always keep their distance. They fall. They cross unimaginable gulfs and land at our feet. And in that descent they remind us that Earth is not an isolated island in space, but part of a living current, a tide of matter flowing between the stars. Sometimes I wonder, did anyone on Manus Island feel it differently? Did some instinct whisper that this was no ordinary falling light, that they were watching something older, stranger, born far beyond the sun's domain? Or was it only me, reading those dry digits years later, who felt the chill that comes when the cosmos bends close enough to touch? That night, a world not our own touched ours, and its fragments may still wait beneath the waves. The sentence echoes in my mind like the faint resonance of a bell. I imagine the ocean floor, dark and timeless, holding those fragments in silence. Somewhere down there, beneath miles of shifting water, rests a piece of matter that once drifted between the stars. It may have passed near alien suns, bathed in light we will never see, before colliding with Earth in a brilliant burst above the Pacific. The enormity of that journey is impossible to grasp. To think of something travelling uncountable distances only to end its story in our skies. Was it coincidence or inevitability? For scientists, the question was not simply where it came from, but what it could tell us. Every meteor carries a history written in its atoms, ratios of isotopes, traces of pressure, scars from collisions long past. But this one might tell a story not of our solar system, but of a different one altogether. Imagine holding in your hand a stone not born under the sun, a fragment from a star system light years away. To study it would be to study a messenger from elsewhere, a rare window into the chemistry of worlds we cannot reach. Yet it lies on the seabed, out of sight, beyond the reach of casual discovery. The Pacific guards its secrets fiercely. I often think of the first astronomers who traced the orbit back, watching the numbers unfold into something extraordinary. The velocity pointed outward, not inward. A hyperbolic trajectory, they whispered, their voices almost incredulous, bound not to return, destined to travel endlessly beyond. It was not the path of a local fragment, not the looping arc of a comet disturbed from the Oort cloud. It was the path of an interstellar wanderer. That realization changes something fundamental in the human mind. We are not only watching the universe from afar, the universe sometimes comes to us. But why here and why then? Out of the vastness of space, what are the chances that a fragment from another system would strike our planet directly? Some dismiss it as nothing more than luck, the statistics of a cosmos filled with endless debris, yet others see it differently. Perhaps the solar system is not as isolated as we think. Perhaps interstellar traffic is more common than we dare to believe. And if fragments of alien systems are falling into our atmosphere, what else might drift across those gulfs? What else could be carried on such journeys, hidden inside the stone and ice of celestial wanderers? The people of Manus Island remember only the light. For them, it was a spectacle, a streak that turned night into day for an instant. Children pointed, elders muttered, the village watched. None of them could know that the fireball blazing above their heads may have been older than the earth itself, shaped by forces long before humans walked upright. To them it was simply an omen of light and sound, soon gone, the ocean swallowing its remains. But what stories might those fragments tell if brought to the surface? Would they whisper of a star smaller than our sun, burning dim and red? Would they carry traces of water, of carbon, of chemistry hinting at life? The questions linger heavier than the stone itself. As I picture the meteor breaking apart, scattering into the ocean, I think about the thinness of the barrier that separates us from the wider universe. A few dozen kilometres of air, and then the open void. That's all. Beyond our atmosphere lies the current that connects the stars, and sometimes pieces of it find us. The CNEOS 2014 fireball was a reminder, sudden and undeniable, that we're not alone in the cosmos, not because of aliens, but because of the very matter of other worlds falling into our own. Yet the ocean still holds its silence, its fragments lie hidden, waiting. And if we were to find them, what truths might they reveal? The question has haunted scientists and dreamers alike since the fireball's descent. For in those fragments may lie a story written not in words but in atoms, a silent record of a world far beyond the sun. To recover them would mean dragging a piece of another system into human hands, a relic from across the stars. But reaching them is no simple task. The ocean floor is a place of eternal night, its vast plains of mud and rock stretching endlessly, guarded by crushing pressure and restless currents. Somewhere in that darkness, pieces of an alien traveller now rest. In the years after the event, debate swirled in academic halls. Some argued the meteor was not interstellar at all, dismissing the velocity data as flawed, insisting it must have been a miscalculation. After all, extraordinary claims demand extraordinary proof, and the idea that Earth had been struck by interstellar debris was too immense to accept lightly. But then came the Pentagon's quiet confirmation. Buried in declassified notes, officials admitted the velocity was accurate. A fragment of the cosmos had indeed arrived from elsewhere. This revelation, made without ceremony, rippled outward into the scientific world. Suddenly the fireball was no longer just another streak in the night sky. It was evidence that the universe reaches across its vastness to touch us. Still, the ocean keeps its secrets. Expeditions have been proposed, vessels fitted with magnetic sleds to comb the seafloor in search of millimetre-sized beads of molten metal. The fused remains of that stellar wanderer. Picture it. A crew standing on the deck of a ship gazing at the endless Pacific horizon, knowing that beneath them, in silence, lies a fragment of another world. The thought alone is staggering. Every wave becomes more than water. It becomes the veil over cosmic treasure. Every gust of wind seems to whisper of the journey those fragments endured, crossing the lightless interstellar gulf to land here. But the ocean is not kind to human ambition. Currents scatter debris across kilometres. Sediment buries what falls. The search becomes not a hunt but a prayer, dragging instruments across the seabed, hoping that something, anything, might be pulled from the deep. And if found, what then? Imagine a shard of stone so ordinary to the eye, grey and pitted like any other, yet holding in its structure the record of a star's furnace, a chemical fingerprint that whispers of a birthplace light years away. That would not be just science, it would be communion. There are moments when I let my mind drift beyond the science, into questions that cannot be measured. What if these fragments are not mere stones? What if they hold within them the echoes of worlds unlike our own, where chemistry took different paths, where the seeds of life may have stirred in alien seas? Could such things travel between stars, carried inside wandering fragments, awaiting a fall onto fertile soil? The fireball of 2014 may not only have been a visitor, but a reminder. An interstellar seed flung carelessly into our world. Did it bring only dust and iron, or did it bring a possibility we do not yet dare to name? And still the Pacific waits, its silence heavy, its floor unbroken. Somewhere in that eternal night lie answers, whether simple or profound, and humanity has only to reach deep enough to uncover them. That sentence lingers in my thoughts like the faint echo of a prayer, as though the sea itself resists being plundered. To imagine what lies beneath is to stand on the edge of something both scientific and spiritual. The fragments are not just debris, they are the whispers of another system, perhaps of another star's planets crumbling long ago. What human hands might recover would not merely be a rock, it would be a memory of a place we cannot visit, a place that touched us in fire before sinking into saltwater oblivion. The first major discussions of recovery plans revealed more than technical details. They revealed the psychology of awe. I recall reading transcripts of scientists debating the logistics of trawling the seafloor, but beneath their words lay something deeper, the recognition that they were preparing to touch the beyond. When the Pentagon confirmed the meteor's interstellar origin, it was as though the curtain of the cosmos had been pulled back just enough to let us see the impossible. And so a quiet determination grew. If fragments existed, they had to be found. The drive was not greed, nor fame, but something older, something human. The desire to hold in our hands proof that the universe had come to visit us. Yet doubt remained. Could the fragments have survived the entry at such speed? 60 kilometers per second tears apart stone, vaporizes iron, leaves only droplets and beads. Some claim that by the time the fireball reached the water, nothing but dust remained, sinking invisibly into the abyss. Others countered with hope. The strongest parts, the densest alloys, might have endured, hardened by their very passage through fire. These survivors, if they exist, would now be resting in silence, awaiting discovery. The thought alone feels like a secret whispered from the stars. In moments of reflection, I find myself haunted by the symbolism. A fireball from another system does not simply burn through our skies. It tells us we are part of a greater fabric, stitched not by nations or eras, but by the restless tide of matter across galaxies. It makes our world feel less isolated, less singular. If stones from other systems can reach us, then we are not cut off from the wider cosmos. We are immersed in it. The meteor becomes not only an object, but a reminder that separation is an illusion. What falls from the sky is not foreign. It is kin, bound to us by the same laws of gravity and chance that shape all things. Still, the Pacific silence gnaws at me. Sometimes I imagine a diver plunging into those depths, their light cutting through black water, illuminating nothing but endless mud. The fragments, if they exist, are too small for the eye, scattered like stars across a seabed of silt. To find them would be like sifting through eternity itself, searching for a single grain of sand that does not belong. Yet the effort persists, because if even one is recovered, if even one bead of metal is brought up, the universe itself will have left us a letter written in the language of elements, a letter we must learn to read. The fireball of 2014 challenges us with a paradox. The cosmos is both unreachable and close, impossibly vast yet capable of touching us without warning. That paradox unsettles me because it erodes the boundary we draw between here and there, between us and them. If interstellar matter can collide with Earth once, it can happen again. Perhaps it already has, many times over, and we never noticed. How many stories of light in the sky, passed down through myths and folklore, were born of such encounters? How many times has the ocean hidden the evidence of visitors from afar? If the Pacific still guards those fragments, then it is also guarding our chance to prove that we are part of something greater than the solar system alone. And so the question grows sharper. Who will dare to uncover them, and what will we find when the ocean finally gives up its silence? That question does not just linger in the halls of science, it presses into the human imagination like a weight. To uncover such fragments is not merely to answer a scientific query, it is to confront the reality that we have already been touched by the cosmos. The fireball did not politely pass by like Oumuamua or Borisov. It struck, entered, burned, and buried itself into our planet. It claimed a piece of Earth as part of its journey, and now its remnants lie somewhere beneath the restless waves of the Pacific. The first revelation, the one that shook so many, was the undeniable hyperbolic trajectory. Astronomers had seen such orbits before, but never tied to a direct collision with Earth. This was not a visitor that skirted around us. It pierced the veil of our sky. The velocity was not a number on a page. It was a story written in fire. To some, this meant Earth had been chosen at random, a target caught by chance. But others whispered that chance itself might be rarer than we think. What if interstellar debris finds us more often than we realise? What if the Earth, with its size and position, is not simply a passive observer of the cosmos, but an inevitable recipient of its wandering stones? For those who believe this, the fragments beneath the ocean are more than scientific samples. They are the proof of a pattern. If we can recover them, we may find evidence that this was not the first time, and certainly not the last. Perhaps ancient fireballs lost to human memory were also interstellar. Perhaps myths of falling stars, of gods hurling fire, of omens descending from heaven, were born from moments just like the one in 2014. Did ancient people stand on the shores, watching streaks of light crash into the sea, never knowing they were witnessing the universe reaching into our world? The attempt to retrieve the fragments has grown into a vision bordering on obsession. Imagine ships navigating the vast Pacific, dragging magnetic collectors across the seabed, combing for beads of fused metal the size of sand grains. Scientists describe them clinically, but I cannot help but picture each as a jewel, each one a relic forged in another system's fire. Perhaps they carry isotopes unknown to our solar system, or alloys that speak of worlds with different histories of creation. Holding even one between your fingers would be like shaking hands with the unknown. But there is another possibility, one that disturbs me. What if what we find is not just matter, but message? Nature sometimes encodes information without intention. The ratio of elements becomes a signature of the star that birthed them. Yet what if the meteor carried more? Could the fragments conceal traces of molecular patterns, complex arrangements that resemble the beginnings of life? Could they be accidental carriers or deliberate ones? The difference between accident and intent is immense, but when staring at fragments born light years away, who can draw that line with certainty? I wonder too about the silence of the Pacific. The ocean hides not only these fragments, but countless wrecks, lost histories, drowned cities, bones of sailors and explorers who never came home. Now it hides something else. A visitor not from another land, but from another sun. Perhaps the ocean is the great archive, swallowing both human stories and cosmic ones alike. And maybe, just maybe, it does not keep them forever. Perhaps it waits for us to learn how to listen, how to dig deep enough to recover what it has guarded. The interstellar fireball of 2014 is more than a scientific anomaly. It is a mirror, forcing us to see Earth not as the centre of things, but as part of a wider stage. We are not watching the universe from afar. We are participants in it, whether we acknowledge it or not. And now we face the challenge, to pull from the ocean's silence the evidence that will confirm what we already sense, that we have been touched by another world and that it will happen again. The real mystery is not whether the fragments are down there, but what story they will tell once brought into the light. That single thought opens a door to something larger than science. For if the fragments of CNEOS 2014 truly rest beneath the Pacific, then they are more than mere objects to catalogue. They are storytellers, silent voices from beyond our sun. To lift them from the seabed would be to invite the cosmos into our laboratories, to place on a table what once drifted across unmeasurable distances. And yet, as I dwell on it, I cannot help but wonder if humanity is prepared to hear what those voices say. Consider what has already happened with other interstellar visitors. Oumuamua, discovered in 2017, passed through our system like a fleeting whisper. Its elongated shape, its peculiar acceleration, defied easy explanation. For a moment, the world considered whether it was more than natural. Then, 2 years later, Borisov arrived, unmistakably a comet, yet undeniably from outside our solar system. These were glimpses, reminders that interstellar travel is not confined to imagination. But CNEOS 2014 was different. It did not drift past at a safe distance. It struck. It became part of Earth's history in a way the others did not. That makes it more intimate, more unsettling. The universe, in its vast silence, chose not to pass us by, but to touch us directly. In that touch lies the possibility of revelation. Imagine fragments showing isotopic ratios unlike any found in our system, metals arranged in forms shaped by stars of different ages, different natures. Imagine a piece of material older than Earth itself, still bearing the chemical fingerprint of its birthplace. To hold such a thing is to collapse the distance of light years into the space of a hand. It is to look at a stone and see the memory of alien suns. Would we treat it as data or as a relic? But there is also a darker thought. What if the story those fragments tell is not a comforting one? What if they carry records of violence, of destruction, of planets torn apart in collisions far from our eyes? A shard of another system might be nothing more than the wreckage of a world that never survived. If so, when we recover it, we're not simply studying geology, we're cradling a grave marker. And that knowledge could cut deeply into the human imagination, reminding us that our own world too may someday fall into ruin, its fragments scattered across the cosmos. I return often to the image of Manus Island, where people saw the sky burn that night without knowing what it meant. For them it was a spectacle, a fleeting wonder, but they were the witnesses to something no human in recorded history had ever seen, an interstellar body colliding with Earth. Did any of them feel an instinctive unease, some primal recognition that the fireball was more than a meteor, that it was a message, written not in language but in light? If so, that message was brief, vanishing into the sea in seconds, and now it waits, beneath pressure and darkness for us to find it again. The thought lingers. If we do find those fragments, we will not only learn about another system, we will learn about ourselves. We will learn how small we truly are, how fragile, how temporary in the face of cosmic currents. And perhaps that realization is the true gift of the CNEOS 2014 meteor. Not simply that it came from beyond, but that it forces us to look beyond, to accept that we are participants in a drama written across stars. Still, the ocean does not yield easily. Its silence is heavy, its resistance endless. And yet within that silence lies the promise of an answer waiting to be heard. That image of silence has followed me for nights, almost as if the sea itself is aware of what it holds. The Pacific is not merely water, it is a living vault, a place where time hides its treasures and buries its witnesses. And in this vault rests a question older than us. What happens when the universe sends one of its messengers directly into our world? When I imagine the fragments lying there, I see them not as lifeless beads, but as symbols, each one a reminder that the universe is never still. We are accustomed to thinking of stars and planets as distant, untouchable. But CNEOS 2014 shattered that illusion. The cosmos is not far away. It is already here, in our sky, in our seas, in our soil. If we could gather even a handful of those remnants, they would be like time capsules from a place where human eyes will never see. Perhaps they were once part of a planet long since destroyed, orbiting a star that has itself faded into darkness. Or perhaps they wandered freely, ancient vagabonds, older than Earth, older than the solar system itself. And yet, there is something haunting about reaching into the deep ocean to reclaim them. The sea has always been the boundary of mystery, the edge of the known. For centuries, sailors feared what lay beneath, imagining monsters that swallowed ships whole. Today the monsters are gone, but the fear remains, not of creatures, but of silence, of the crushing weight of miles of water pressing against any human attempt to see clearly. What if the fragments do not wish to be found? What if the sea keeps them hidden for a reason? These thoughts might sound like superstition, but standing at the edge of the Pacific, watching its endless surface, I feel that unease settle into me like a second tide. Scientists speak with certainty of magnetic sleds, of expeditions dragging across the seabed, of collecting tiny metallic pearls formed in the violence of impact. But beyond the equations lies a human truth. The first person to hold such a fragment will be holding not just matter, but meaning. How will it feel, knowing you cradle in your palm a piece of another sun's creation? The weight may be small, but the burden immense. Will it change the way we see ourselves, or will it be reduced to a specimen in a drawer, its wonder lost in sterile labels? I cannot shake the feeling that fragments from another star are not just science, but mirrors. They show us what we are, fragile, temporary, drifting in the same current as they do. When I think of that night over Manus Island, I imagine how brief it must have seemed to those who watched. A flash, a roar, a fading trail. And yet within that instant was the collapse of distances we cannot measure. Light years folded into seconds, the endless journey ending in fire. The villagers may not have known it, but they bore witness to the collision of worlds, the moment the infinite met the earthly. It is easy to speak of data, of hyperbolic trajectories and orbital mechanics, but the heart of the story is simpler, more human. A stone from beyond fell into our ocean, and now we must decide what it means. Do we treat it as a curiosity, a footnote in astronomy? Or do we accept that it is something sacred, a reminder that the cosmos has always been closer than we dare to admit? The silence of the Pacific continues to guard the answer. And yet, if we ever succeed in lifting those fragments from the deep, we will not only recover matter, we will recover perspective. That single line carries the weight of an unspoken truth. Perspective is what humanity needs most. We often believe we understand our place in the cosmos, yet in truth, we live inside a fragile shell of certainty, fragile as glass. One meteor, one fireball, one fragment from another system tears that shell apart, forcing us to face what we have long ignored, that the universe is not watching us from afar but brushing against us, weaving us into its immense and endless story. The perspective such a discovery could bring would ripple outward, far beyond laboratories and research papers. Imagine a schoolchild holding a picture of a recovered fragment, hearing that it once travelled across light years before colliding with Earth. That child would never again see the night sky as empty. Imagine nations divided by politics and boundaries suddenly realising that they all live beneath the same roof of stars, and that those stars send their messengers down to Earth without prejudice. A fragment from beyond could remind us, with more force than any speech, that we are one species, small and fragile, sharing the same planet beneath a vast and ancient sky. But perspective is a double-edged gift. To some it may be inspiring, to others terrifying. For if rocks can cross the infinite gulf and strike us without warning, what else might cross it? We are used to thinking of danger as terrestrial, wars, earthquakes, storms. Yet the true storms may come from beyond, from the random scatter of cosmic debris, from fragments of alien systems hurled across space by forces we cannot control. The meteor of 2014 was small, but what if it had been larger? What if, instead of burning out in fire, it had brought devastation? Perspective reminds us of fragility, but fragility is not a comforting truth. I think often of the silence that followed the fireball. For a few moments the sky blazed. The villagers of Manus Island watched in awe, and then darkness, waves, nothing. The ocean swallowed the remains and the world forgot. Years passed before anyone realised what they had truly seen. How many such moments have come and gone in history, lost because no one had the tools to understand? Ancient watchers might have seen similar fireballs and woven them into their myths. Fire from the gods, omens of change, symbols of destruction or rebirth. Perhaps they too glimpsed interstellar visitors, though they could not name them as such. And in their stories, fragments of the cosmos still survive, carried not in stone but in memory. If we find the fragments today, will we treat them only as samples, as data points? Or will we recognise their deeper meaning? The answer depends on us. Science will tell us what elements are present, what isotopes define them, what star they may have been born under. But meaning lies not only in numbers, it lies in the way we allow such discoveries to change us. The real perspective is not that fragments from beyond exist. It is that we live in a universe alive with motion, where nothing is truly separate. That realization demands humility, and perhaps that is why the ocean keeps its silence. Perhaps the fragments remain hidden because humanity has not yet decided how to listen. The search for them is not only a technological challenge, but a moral one. When we recover them, if we recover them, we will also recover a reflection of ourselves. Will we see in them only material to analyse, or will we see a mirror of our own journey? Fragile travellers in a universe too vast to comprehend. The Pacific still waits, unbroken, patient. But when we finally break that silence, we may discover not only what those fragments are, but what we are becoming. That thought stirs something deeper than curiosity. It suggests that the search for interstellar debris is not just about uncovering pieces of rock, but about uncovering the truth of our own trajectory as a species. We're always moving forward, building, exploring, reaching, but often without pausing to ask what we are becoming in the process. The fragments from the CNEOS 2014 meteor are not simply matter. They are a question placed before humanity, a challenge asking whether we are ready to see ourselves reflected in something older, stranger, and greater than us. Scientists talk of equipment, dredging devices, deep-sea magnets designed to sweep across the seabed. But I find myself drawn less to the machines and more to the men and women who would stand on those ships, staring out across the endless blue, knowing what lies beneath. How heavy their thoughts must be, realising that if they succeed, they will be the first to hold in their hands a fragment of another system. Perhaps they will feel pride, but perhaps also a kind of dread. To be the first to touch something that does not belong to Earth is to cross a boundary no one has crossed before, and boundaries matter. For as long as humanity has existed, we have drawn them. The horizon, the ocean, the sky, the stars. Each boundary, once crossed, changes us. Crossing into the Pacific once revealed new worlds to explorers. Crossing into the sky gave birth to flight. Crossing into space showed us our planet in its fragile wholeness. Now, the next boundary is not outward but inward, reaching into our own ocean to retrieve something from far beyond. It is a paradox that to touch another star's relic we must dive into our own abyss. I imagine the moment of discovery, a fragment, pulled from mud and silt, lifted from the magnetic sled, glistening wet under the ship's lights. To the untrained eye it might look unremarkable, a small bead, a dull stone, but in truth it would be unlike anything ever held before. Its atoms arranged by a star, not our sun, its journey measured not in years or centuries but in epochs beyond human imagination. To hold it would be to feel the weight of a story billions of years old, compressed into the silence of a single object. Yet, I cannot shake the darker side of the vision. What if those fragments hold something unsettling? A ratio of isotopes that defies natural explanation. A structure too precise, too deliberate to be mere chance. Science would demand caution, analysis, proof. But the human mind, restless and imaginative, would leap to questions no lab could silence. What if the fragment is more than matter? What if it is message, intentional or accidental, carried across gulfs of time and space to fall here, into our sea? And even if it is only stone, it still carries meaning. For what is meaning, if not what we choose to see in the universe's patterns? To some, the fireball was only light. To others it was a sign. To me, it is both, a physical event and a symbolic one. A reminder that Earth is not closed off, not sealed within its own orbit, but part of a wider current flowing between stars, and if fragments can cross that current, then perhaps so can we. The Pacific continues its vigil, silent, endless, patient. But every silence waits for a sound to break it, and when we reach into its depths, we may not only find fragments of another world, we may find fragments of ourselves we have long ignored. That thought cuts through me like a blade of recognition. For in the end, perhaps the meteor is not the true mystery. Perhaps the greater secret lies in how we respond to it. Do we approach it with reverence, with humility, with wonder, or with the cold detachment of collectors cataloguing trophies? The ocean will not tell us how to choose. It will only offer what it guards and leave the meaning for us to decide. The second revelation about the 2014 fireball came not from the sea, but from the sky. When scientists analysed the data, they realised its speed and trajectory placed it among the fastest meteors ever observed. Its velocity was beyond what gravity from our sun could hold, beyond what any known orbit could explain. That meant the object did not belong to this solar system. It had wandered from afar, moving through space on a path no planet or star here had ever shaped. That realisation was like a shockwave. Suddenly what had been a local spectacle was reframed as something cosmic. Earth had not simply been struck by rock, it had been struck by an outsider. The implications were staggering. If one interstellar meteor could collide with Earth, then there must be countless others roaming the galaxy, invisible until the moment of impact. Earth may not be an isolated world, but a gathering place for fragments of distant systems, each carrying its own hidden history. Some may bring only dust and metal, others perhaps may carry more. The possibility unsettles me, because it suggests we are not passive observers of the universe, but participants in its ceaseless exchange of matter. We are being visited all the time, even if we do not notice, and yet this particular fireball was noticed. The people of Manus Island saw it, the satellites recorded it, and years later scientists confirmed it. But the deeper truth remains buried in the Pacific. The ocean floor is a stubborn archive. keeping its contents sealed in darkness, as though testing our determination. To retrieve those fragments is to accept the challenge of the sea, to prove that our curiosity is strong enough to overcome its silence. I think of what will happen if they are found. Laboratories will analyse them, microscopes will scan their surfaces, instruments will measure their isotopic fingerprints. The reports will speak of rare metals, unusual ratios, structures shaped in furnaces not of our sun. But beyond the reports, something quieter will stir in the human soul, the holding. A fragment of another system is not simply science, it is intimacy. It is proof that the universe does not keep its distance. It reaches for us, as we reach for it. Still, I feel the unease of another question. If the universe can send us fragments, what else might come? If a meteor can cross light years to strike our ocean, could larger bodies do the same? Catastrophe is always a possibility. The fireball of 2014 was small, harmless compared to what could have been. But its existence whispers of risk, of randomness, of vulnerability. We are small beneath the endless night, and sometimes the night falls into us. The silence of the Pacific remains, heavy, patient. But silence is never eternal. One day we will pull something from its depths, and when we do, we may not be ready for what it tells us. For the story of the CNEOS 2014 meteor is not just about an object from another star. It is about us, and whether we are prepared to face what such encounters reveal. That sentence lingers in the back of my mind, unsettling in its simplicity. For what it truly asks is not whether we can recover a fragment of interstellar stone, but whether we can recover the courage to see ourselves reflected in it. We are drawn to the stars with telescopes and dreams, but what happens when the stars come to us uninvited? The meteor's descent is not only a matter of astronomy, it is a mirror thrust before humanity, asking us to confront truths we may not wish to see. The psychological weight of that moment cannot be overstated. Think of it. A piece of matter born beneath a foreign sun, wandering for untold ages, collides with our atmosphere, burns bright above the Pacific and sinks into the sea. It is as though the universe itself tapped us on the shoulder, reminding us that we are not alone, that we are not isolated, that we are not even in control of our own sky. To some, that thought inspires wonder. To others, it inspires dread. Which of those reactions we choose may determine how history remembers us. I imagine the people of Manus Island again, standing on the shore that night. To them it was only a light, sudden and beautiful, disappearing into the dark. But what if for a moment someone among them felt a fear deeper than awe? What if some instinct told them this was not a local event, but something larger, something older? Perhaps they could not name it, but perhaps they felt it nonetheless. Because deep down, humanity has always known it. We are vulnerable beneath the stars. The sky that gives us beauty can also deliver fire. And yet vulnerability is not weakness. In many ways, it is the key to wonder. For to be vulnerable is to be open, to risk destruction, but also to allow connection. The interstellar meteor was destructive only in its fall, but in its survival it offered connection. A fragment of another world has touched ours, and that bond, however fragile, is undeniable. What we do with that bond will shape not only science, but the human soul. But there is a darker layer to this reflection, one that creeps into my thoughts when silence falls too heavily. What if the meteor is not unique? What if Earth has been struck by interstellar fragments countless times across its history, long before we had the instruments to measure them? The ocean floors and desert sands may already hold the debris of alien suns, scattered through our geology like unmarked tombstones. If that is true, then Earth itself is a mosaic of the stars, carrying within its crust the memory of systems long gone. And if that is true, how many silent visitors have shaped us without our knowing? The question grows heavier when I think of life itself. If matter can cross between systems, can life? Could fragments like CNEOS 2014 carry within them not only elements but the seeds of biology? The idea is intoxicating and terrifying at once. Perhaps our oceans have been seeded again and again, whispers of life arriving in the form of fireballs, dissolving in water, leaving behind chemistry that could blossom into something more. If so, the question is not whether we are alone, but whether we were ever truly isolated to begin with. I sit with these thoughts often, letting them settle over me like the stillness of the sea. The interstellar meteor is no longer just a rock, it is a test of our science, a test of our imagination, and most of all, a test of our courage to face what it might mean if we are part of something far larger than we have ever dared to believe. And so, the silence of the Pacific deepens, not only an archive of matter, but an archive of meaning daring us to descend and retrieve both. The ocean's silence is not empty. It is full of weight, of patience, of truths pressed into darkness over millennia. That is why this meteor matters more than most will ever realize. It is not just a question of what metals or isotopes might be hidden in its remains, but of what happens when humanity dares to disturb the quiet of the deep and bring back something that does not belong to Earth at all. To many this would seem like a triumph of science, a moment of pride. Yet I sense beneath it a kind of trembling. For when we lift something from beyond the stars, we lift more than matter. We lift the veil of our own ignorance, and behind that veil may lie truths we are not ready for. What if the fragment reveals that our world is not unique, that what we thought was singular is instead common, repeated in systems across the galaxy? Would such a revelation bring comfort, or would it unsettle the fragile myth that has guided us for centuries, that we are exceptional, chosen, distinct? I think of the scientists who pore over the data, their lives devoted to numbers, models, predictions, and yet, even in their precision, I sense the spark of something deeper. They do not chase the meteor only for proof, they chase it for meaning. Perhaps they would never admit it, but when they dream of holding a rust fragment from another star, they're reaching not for data but for connection. To touch the unknown is to collapse the distance between us and everything else, to remind ourselves that we are not merely spectators of the cosmos, but participants in its story. Still, that participation comes with weight. I imagine the first person to hold such a fragment in their hands, staring down at a small piece of rock, dull in appearance, heavy with secrets. Would they feel pride, fear, reverence, or perhaps guilt for disturbing something that might have been better left in the dark? Every great discovery comes with a shadow, and this one will be no different. To lift something that has travelled across the void is to accept that the void itself has reached into us. That knowledge may haunt more deeply than we expect, and yet haunting truths are often the ones that change us most. Perhaps that is why this story grips me. Not because it is about a meteor, but because it is about us, our longing, our fear, our need to belong to something greater than the narrow boundaries of our sky. The meteor is only a vessel. What it carries is a reminder that we are not isolated islands, but threads in a wider weave, bound to stars we cannot see, touched by systems that know nothing of us. But there is another layer, one that gnaws at me when I stare too long into the silence of the sea. What if what we find is not natural? What if, hidden in those fragments, lies evidence of something crafted, something shaped not by cosmic chance but by intention? The line between accident and design blurs when seen from too great a distance. A bead of metal, a shard of stone, ordinary to the eye, extraordinary in its context. If even a trace of deliberate order were found, what would we make of it? Would we accept it? Or would we deny it, fearing what it might mean about the universe and our place within it? The ocean remains patient, unyielding. It has swallowed the fireball's story and holds it close, like a secret it refuses to give easily. But secrets cannot remain buried forever. One day, whether through science, persistence, or fate, we will recover those fragments. And when we do, we may find that the silence of the Pacific was not a silence at all, but a warning, waiting to be heard. The idea of a warning unsettles me more than the meteor itself. For what kind of warning could arrive from another system, wrapped in fire, buried in water, hidden for years until someone dares to retrieve it? Warnings are not always deliberate. Sometimes they are simply the echoes of what has already happened elsewhere. A fragment from another star may carry with it the memory of catastrophe. Worlds destroyed, systems broken, stars fading. Perhaps in its silence it tells us what has happened before can happen again. There is a shadow of inevitability in such thoughts. The universe is not gentle. It creates, yes, but it also erases. Stars collapse, planets shatter, comets strike. Entire systems vanish into the black. The interstellar meteor may not be a gift but a scar, a piece of evidence torn from the body of a world that no longer exists. If that is true, then to recover it is not only to study another place, but to witness its death. Would we be ready for such knowledge? Or would we turn away, unwilling to accept that our own Earth is equally fragile, equally temporary? This fear is not new. Across centuries, people have looked at the sky with a mixture of awe and dread. Ancient civilizations told stories of stars falling as omens of doom, gods hurling fire to punish or warn. Perhaps, without knowing it, they were closer to the truth than they realized. The fireballs they saw could have been local, yes, but what if just once one of them was not? What if, long before 2014, an interstellar body streaked across the heavens and was remembered only as myth? If so, the fragments of that fall may still lie buried in sands or seas, forgotten by history but waiting in silence. And yet, silence has a way of shaping us. When we look into the night sky, we are looking into a silence so vast it swallows words, thoughts, even time itself. The silence of the Pacific feels like a reflection of that cosmic stillness, an abyss above, an abyss below, and humanity caught in between. To disturb that silence with discovery is to risk disturbing ourselves. For if the meteor is indeed a warning, then what it warns us of is not just cosmic danger, but cosmic perspective. The reminder that we are not the centre, not the exception, but only a part of the larger flow of creation and destruction. I wonder what the first recovered fragment will look like under a microscope. Will it show patterns in its crystalline structure that betray its foreign birth? Will it shimmer with alloys unseen in our solar system? Or will it appear disappointingly ordinary, a dull stone indistinguishable from earthly rocks? If it is the latter, the danger lies in dismissing it too quickly, forgetting that the extraordinary is not always visible on the surface. Even the most ordinary-looking fragment can hold within it the story of a star's furnace, a journey across centuries of light, and the collapse of worlds we will never know. Perhaps that is the true warning, not catastrophe, not destruction, but indifference. The universe does not announce itself with grand speeches. It speaks through fireballs, through silence, through fragments that fall and vanish into the sea. If we ignore them, we risk ignoring the only voice the stars can give us. And so the warning is not about doom, but about awareness. To see, to listen, to recognize that we're not alone in this cosmic tide. Still, the silence continues. The Pacific holds its fragments tightly, as though reluctant to release them. But silence, no matter how deep, cannot last forever. One day we will dive into that darkness, and when we bring its secrets to the surface, we may realize that the warning was never about the stars. It was about ourselves. That sentence refuses to leave me, echoing every time I stare into the stillness of the night sky. Because if the meteor was a mirror, then what it reflects most clearly is not the vastness of the cosmos, but the limits of our own perception. We look upward and see infinity, yet so often we fail to see what infinity means for us, our fragility, our impermanence, our connection to a drama much larger than human history. The silence of the Pacific is not indifference, it is patience. The ocean has always been a keeper of secrets, swallowing ships, civilizations, memories, and now, perhaps, a fragment of another star's world. To disturb that patience is to test ourselves. Will we approach it with the humility of seekers or the arrogance of conquerors? This is not merely a scientific question, it is a moral one. For in lifting fragments from the deep, we are also lifting the weight of our own responsibility to understand them. Responsibility is what frightens me most, because discovery changes us. Once the interstellar origin of the 2014 meteor was confirmed, we could no longer pretend Earth is untouched by the wider universe. That knowledge is irreversible, and when we finally recover its fragments, we will cross another line that cannot be crossed back. We will hold in our hands proof that the gulf between stars is not impassable, that material flows across it, carrying stories we have barely begun to decipher. Once seen, this truth cannot be unseen. Once held, this burden cannot be released. Sometimes I imagine the fragment's journey. Perhaps it began as part of a planet orbiting a red dwarf, shattered when two bodies collided. Perhaps it was ejected from its home system during a time when Earth's own continents were still young. Across billions of years, it drifted, silent, alone, until at last gravity's hand drew it toward our planet. That moment of collision was the end of its journey. But for us, it was the beginning of a story that now lies dormant beneath the sea, waiting for us to finish it. But perhaps that is why the silence feels so heavy, because the story it guards may not comfort us. What if the fragment reveals that planets are more fragile than we thought? That collisions and extinctions are not rare but inevitable? What if it shows that what we call home is nothing more than a temporary sanctuary, destined to be shattered like the worlds that birthed these wandering stones? To touch the fragment is to touch not only another system but our own possible fate. That realization is heavier than any rock, and yet humanity has never turned away from such burdens. We climbed mountains not because they offered safety, but because they offered perspective. We sailed oceans not because they promised comfort, but because they promised discovery. And now we peer into the abyss of the Pacific not because it guarantees answers, but because it dares us to ask questions. That is what makes us human, the refusal to let silence remain unbroken. Still, I cannot escape the thought that when we recover the fragment, we may find not just a mirror, but a prophecy written in elements and isotopes, whispering that what has happened elsewhere will one day happen here. If so, the meteor's descent was not random. It was a reminder that Earth is part of a cycle larger than any human empire, a cycle that does not spare worlds or civilizations. The silence of the Pacific holds steady, but the weight of what it conceals grows heavier with every passing year. And when it finally breaks, when the fragments are brought into the light, we may learn that the greatest mystery was never about where they came from, but about what they are destined to tell us. That thought unsettles me more than the fireball itself, because it suggests the meteor is not just an object of study, but a messenger, a voice that has travelled across the gulf of stars to place a story in our hands. And like all stories, it demands to be heard. What troubles me is not the possibility that we will find nothing, but that we will find too much, that the fragments will speak truths we are not prepared to hear. There is a strange tension between awe and dread in this pursuit. On one hand, the promise of discovery drives us forward, pushing expeditions into the Pacific's depths. On the other, there is the knowledge that discovery carries consequences. When Prometheus stole fire, humanity gained light and warmth, but also danger, punishment, and pain. What if these interstellar fragments are a kind of cosmic fire? To hold them may be to hold not only knowledge but responsibility, a responsibility heavier than the fragments themselves. The vision that keeps returning to me is vivid, a fragment raised from the sea floor, lifted from the dark silence of the ocean, gleaming wet under artificial lights. In that moment, the Pacific's patience would be broken, its centuries of silence shattered by human hands. On that deck, surrounded by the endless horizon, someone will hold a piece of another world, and as small as it may be, as insignificant as it might look, the weight of that moment could be enough to bend the course of history. For in that instant, humanity will no longer be able to say the universe is far away. The The universe will be here, tangible, undeniable. But what if it does not end there? What if that fragment is not alone? The more I dwell on it, the more I wonder whether CNEOS 2014 was a solitary traveller or part of a larger stream of interstellar debris. The galaxy is vast and collisions are endless. Perhaps Earth is not struck rarely, but constantly, its skies blazing from time to time with visitors from beyond. We may not yet have the eyes to recognise them, but they are already here, falling unnoticed into deserts, forests, oceans. If so, then the 2014 meteor was not an exception. It was a revelation of a pattern we have long ignored. And then there is the possibility, one that chills me, that such visitors may not always be harmless. The fireball of 2014 was small enough to burn in the atmosphere, its fragments scattering into the sea. But what if a larger body followed the same path? What if one day the ocean does not merely hide fragments, but witnesses devastation? That is the nightmare the meteor awakens. Not only that we are connected to the stars, but that we are vulnerable to them. The same heavens that inspire our wonder also hold our potential undoing. Yet fear is not the end of the story. Fear is the beginning of awareness, and awareness is what gives us a chance to act. The fireball is not just a reminder of our fragility. It is a challenge to prepare, to imagine, to see ourselves as part of the wider cosmos rather than separate from it. Perhaps that is what the fragments are destined to tell us, not simply where they came from, but where we must go. That night in 2014, a fireball from another system burned above the Pacific and vanished into the sea. Its silence has haunted us ever since, and now, as we reach for it, we're not only reaching for answers, we're reaching for our own future, uncertain of what we will find when the abyss finally gives back what it has hidden. That uncertainty is like a shadow stretching across the Pacific, long and unbroken. To chase the fragments of the CNEOS 2014 meteor is to peer into more than water. It is to peer into ourselves. Because the truth of the meteor is not only in its foreignness, but in the way it forces us to confront what kind of species we are when faced with the unknown. Do we press forward, guided by wonder, or do we falter, guided by fear? The abyss is not an easy thing to face. It has no voice, no face, no promise of clarity. Only the endless, dark, pressing silence, and the faint whisper of currents moving in eternal patience. It is in this abyss that the fragments rest, untouched since that night in 2014, preserved in the stillness of the seafloor. The thought of them lying there, encased in mud, is strange, like relics of an altar no human built, waiting for worshippers who do not yet understand the language. That image unsettles me because it feels too much like fate, as though the cosmos placed them there intentionally, daring us to claim them. But intention is dangerous to assume. The meteor may have been nothing more than chance, a wanderer caught in Earth's pull, and yet the human mind resists chance. We seek patterns, meaning, narrative. We cannot help but wonder if the fireball was not simply a rock, but a reminder. If it was a message, its words are written not in sound, but in silence, and silence can speak as loudly as fire. When I think of the fragments, I imagine two possibilities. The first is ordinary, beads of metal, droplets of fused stone, hardened in their fiery descent. To study them would still be extraordinary, revealing isotopes from another system, proof of our connection to stars beyond the sun. But the second possibility lingers like a shadow, the possibility of the unexpected, a structure too precise to be natural, a ratio that defies explanation, a pattern we cannot dismiss as coincidence. If such a thing were found, it would not just shift science, it would fracture the way we see ourselves. Because in that moment, the silence of the Pacific would no longer be silence at all. It would be speech, clear and undeniable. The ocean's patience becomes almost unbearable when seen in this light. Imagine it, holding the fragments through tides and storms, through years of human indifference, as though protecting them until we are ready. But what does ready mean? Ready to accept that Earth is not alone? Ready to accept that life may not be unique? Or ready to accept that the universe does not wait for us, that it brushes against us whether we acknowledge it or not? The fireball was not a warning in sound, but perhaps in timing. It arrived when our instruments could record it, when our minds could question it. That timing feels deliberate, though it may not be, and that too is unsettling. As I imagine standing on the deck of a ship, staring into the endless horizon, I feel the weight of silence more strongly than the weight of the sea. It is not just about what lies beneath, but about what lies within us. The search for the meteor's fragments is the search for proof, yes, but it is also the search for meaning. If we find only stone, we will still find ourselves reflected in the act of searching. If we find more, we may never be the same again. The silence of the Pacific is vast, but silence is never truly empty. And so, one day, when the fragments are finally raised, the silence will end. Not because the ocean speaks, but because we will finally learn to listen. That thought stays with me, more haunting than the fireball itself. For what is listening, if not the act of surrendering our certainty to hear what we do not expect? To listen to the cosmos means allowing ourselves to be changed by it, and change is rarely gentle. The fragments beneath the Pacific may not only expand our knowledge, they may unravel it, thread by thread, until the picture of the universe we thought we knew is torn open to reveal something new. Listening requires patience, but it also requires courage. Humanity has always strained to hear the voice of the stars, building telescopes, sending probes, lifting radio dishes to the sky. We are desperate for a reply, but perhaps the reply has already arrived. Not as a signal, but as a stone, falling in fire and vanishing into the sea. What if the silence we think surrounds us is not silence at all, but a language we have not yet learned to read? The meteor may not have carried words, but it carried presence, proof that matter itself can cross the vastest distances and find its way to us. That is a form of speech, even if we are deaf to it still. But listening also means confronting fear. What if we do not like what we hear? The fragments could tell us that worlds are fragile, that destruction is inevitable, that what has happened elsewhere will one day happen here. They could remind us that Earth is not safe, not special, not immune to the forces that scatter planets and hurl debris across the galaxy. To hold such knowledge is to hold mortality itself, the mortality of worlds as well as of lives. That is why the silence feels heavier the longer we wait to break it. It is not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of withheld truth. And yet, there is wonder hidden in that weight. To recover a fragment from another system would be to collapse distance itself. Imagine holding in your hand something born light years away, older than our sun, older than the earth beneath your feet. That fragment is not just a rock, it is a survivor, a traveller, a witness to journeys we cannot imagine. To touch it would be to touch the story of another sky. That possibility alone is enough to make the abyss worth entering. Still, I cannot escape the suspicion that there is more to the meteor than chance. The universe is full of randomness, yes, but the timing unsettles me. Why now, when we have the tools to record it? Why above the Pacific, where its fragments could be preserved rather than lost on land? The human mind resists coincidence, and I am no exception. I wonder if this fireball was not only an accident, but also a reminder, a nudge from the cosmos as if to say, you are not alone. You never were. But reminders come with responsibility. If we listen, truly listen, we cannot remain the same. The question then becomes, what do we do with what we hear? Do we reduce it to data, cold and contained, or do we allow it to reshape us, to make us smaller in our own eyes but larger in our sense of belonging? That is the choice the fragments hold. That is the decision awaiting us when the silence ends. And so, the Pacific waits, still and unbroken, a stage set for an encounter we cannot yet script. When the silence finally yields, it may not only give us fragments of another world, It may demand we decide who we are in the face of the infinite. That demand is the most difficult part of the mystery. The meteor is not asking us about stars or stones. It is asking us about ourselves. Who are we truly when confronted with something older than our species, older than our planet, older perhaps than the very sun that warms us? Do we respond with humility or with arrogance, with awe or with fear? The answer will shape not only how we interpret the fragments, but how we interpret our place in the cosmos. The infinite has always unsettled the human mind. We crave boundaries, walls, edges that reassure us the world is containable. But the fireball of 2014 shattered that illusion. It proved that the boundaries we imagine are porous, that the void between stars is not empty, but alive with motion, with travellers we rarely see. And when one of those travellers collided with our world, the infinite ceased to be abstract. It became real, tangible, undeniable. That is why the silence of the Pacific feels so heavy. It holds not only fragments of stone, but fragments of truth, truths we may not want to touch. I often wonder what it will feel like when we finally recover one. A scientist, gloved hands trembling, lifting a bead of molten metal from a tray, cameras flashing, reports drafted, headlines written. But beneath all of that noise, a deeper stillness will settle, because in that moment humanity will be holding something that does not belong here, something that has travelled farther than any machine we have ever built, something that has outlasted entire ages of our history. To hold it will be to confront our own brevity, our own smallness in the face of the infinite. And yet, smallness is not weakness. There is beauty in it too. To be small is to be part of something vast, to be connected to a greater whole. Perhaps that is the gift the fragments carry, the chance to remind us that isolation is an illusion. Earth has never been sealed away from the galaxy. We are bathed in it, brushed by its currents, struck by its wanderers. We are not separate from the infinite, we are immersed in it. But the infinite can also wound. The same skies that send us light send us fire. The same universe that creates also destroys. Perhaps the meteor is not only a message of belonging, but a reminder of vulnerability. Earth is fragile, its surface thin, its defences limited. A larger interstellar body could have ended us, and perhaps someday one will. To study the fragments is also to admit the inevitability of risk. That admission is heavy but necessary. Only by facing it can we begin to prepare for what the cosmos may yet bring. Still, the possibility of wonder outweighs the dread. Imagine discovering in the fragments traces of water, carbon, or patterns that suggest chemistry familiar to life. Imagine learning that our building blocks are not unique, that the seeds of life are scattered through the galaxy, carried on fireballs across gulfs of space. If so, then life on Earth may not be an exception, but part of a larger chorus, a chorus whose voices we're only beginning to hear. That thought is as humbling as it is exhilarating. The Pacific remains silent for now, its depths holding their secrets with patience beyond measure. But patience is not eternity. One day, when we are ready, or perhaps before we are ready, the silence will break. And when it does, it will not be the fragments alone that we recover, but the realization that the infinite has always been closer than we dared believe. That thought settles over me like a weight, pressing as heavily as the waters of the Pacific themselves. For readiness is a fragile illusion. Humanity rarely waits until it is ready. We leap, we grasp, we uncover, and only afterward do we understand what it means. What if this moment is no different? What if the silence breaks not when we are prepared, but when the universe decides it is time? There are whispers among some scientists that CNEOS 2014 was not the first of its kind, that in old records, hidden in forgotten observatories, there may be traces of other fireballs, their velocities too great, their orbits too strange to belong to our solar system. If true, then Earth may have been touched by interstellar visitors many times before. And if so, where are those fragments now? Buried in deserts, sunk in oceans, scattered across mountains. The Earth may already hold countless pieces of other systems, lying hidden in plain sight, waiting for us to notice. The 2014 meteor may not have been an arrival. It may have been a revelation, the first time we recognised what had always been happening. That possibility changes everything. If interstellar fragments rain upon us more often than we think, then the universe is not distant at all. It is here, mingling with our soil, mixing with our oceans, embedding itself in the geology of our world. Earth is not an island, but a collector. Our very crust may be laced with silent visitors, each carrying the fingerprints of alien stars. The 2014 meteor, then, is not unique. It is proof of a hidden truth we have overlooked for centuries, and yet the ocean keeps its secrets, holding them as though testing our determination. Perhaps it knows that fragments alone are not the true gift. The true gift is perspective, the shift in vision that comes when we realise we're not separate from the galaxy, but part of its living current. That thought is exhilarating and terrifying, for if we accept it fully, we can no longer cling to the illusion of safety. We must see ourselves as vulnerable participants in a drama larger than Earth itself. The Pacific in its silence feels almost like a guardian, a keeper of truths too heavy for us to bear all at once. But guardianship is never permanent. Sooner or later, the ocean will give up its fragments, whether we are ready or not. And when it does, we will face not only scientific questions, but existential ones. What does it mean if we find isotopes unknown to our solar system? What does it mean if we find structures that suggest intention? What does it mean if we find nothing at all, only the ordinary dressed in extraordinary distance? Each answer carries weight. Each answer changes us. I think again of Manus Island, of the people who watched the fireball blaze across the sky without knowing what it was. To them it was only a moment, a spectacle fading into memory. But perhaps, without realising it, they bore witness to something greater than any myth, greater than any omen, the breaking of a silence that had lasted for billions of years. They saw the infinite touch Earth, even if they could not name it. And in their unknowing, they remind us that truth does not wait for comprehension. It arrives when it will, with or without our understanding. If CNEOS 2014 was not the first, then Earth is already a museum of cosmic relics, its history written not only by local forces, but by the touch of distant stars. The silence has already been broken. We simply did not listen. The fragments beneath the Pacific are only the latest reminder, daring us to pay attention before another falls. And when the next one comes, will we see it for what it is, or will we again let silence swallow the truth? That question lingers like a weight across centuries, stretching back into the myths of fire in the sky, and forward into futures we cannot yet name. If CNEOS 2014 was not unique, then every generation may have witnessed its own messenger, misunderstood and forgotten. The difference now is that we have the eyes to see, the tools to measure, the minds to recognise the extraordinary. And yet recognition is not enough. To see is one thing, to understand is another. The fragments lying at the bottom of the Pacific are not just pieces of matter. They are a test of whether we will listen this time. For listening is not passive. It requires effort, courage, and the willingness to change. What if the fragments tell us something that unsettles our most comfortable assumptions? What if they reveal that life is common, that worlds are fragile, that destruction is inevitable? What if they whisper that we are not the first to ask these questions, and perhaps not the last? The ocean's silence may be patient, but the message it holds is urgent. I cannot escape the thought that this meteor was part of a larger pattern, a pattern of encounters stretching across Earth's history. Perhaps the dinosaurs once watched such fireballs streak across the sky, unaware that one day a larger body would end their reign. Perhaps early humans saw them too, sparks falling into ancient seas, inspiring fear and reverence in equal measure. The difference now is that we know how to trace orbits, how to measure velocities, how to recognize that something has come not from here but from beyond, and that recognition changes everything. The third revelation about the meteor lies here. Earth is not simply a receiver of interstellar fragments. It is a participant in an ongoing exchange. Just as stones fall to us, fragments of Earth itself may be flung outward, carried into the void by impacts, destined to strike another world one day. The universe does not keep its pieces separated. It scatters them, mingles them, spreads them like seeds. In this way, Earth is not only touched by other systems, but touches them in return. We are not merely witnesses, we are contributors to the endless dialogue of matter. What if, buried beneath the Pacific, lies not only proof of another system's existence, but also proof that Earth itself has already been part of such journeys? If so, then the fireball of 2014 is not just an arrival. It is a reminder that departure is inevitable too. Perhaps fragments of our own planet are already lying in silence on the seafloors of distant worlds, waiting to be discovered by minds we cannot imagine. If that is true, then we're already connected, already part of a conversation written in fire and stone, stretching across the galaxy. This thought humbles me, but it also unsettles me. Because if matter can travel so freely, then what else can? Life perhaps in its simplest forms, hitching rides on fragments surviving in the hidden cracks of rock, carried across the gulf of stars. If so, then life is not bound to Earth. It is a traveller too, restless, seeking new homes in silence. The 2014 meteor may not only have brought us knowledge, it may have brought us kinship, a reminder that our origins may themselves lie in such journeys, billions of years ago. The silence of the Pacific continues, unbroken, but not eternal. The fragments are there, waiting. And with them, perhaps, lies the proof that the story of life is not confined to Earth, but written across worlds, carried by fireballs whispered through collisions. The question is no longer whether the silence will break, but whether we will be ready to hear what it says when it does. Readiness, I realise, is not a state but a choice. Humanity has never truly been ready for the moments that defined it. We were not ready when fire was first tamed, when sails carried us beyond familiar coasts, when machines took to the sky, when rockets tore free of gravity's grasp. And yet, unready as we were, we stepped forward. Perhaps that is how it will be when the Pacific finally yields its fragments. We may not be prepared, but we will be changed all the same. The silence, in its strange way, has been merciful. It has given us time to grow, to question, to prepare our instruments and our minds. But silence is not absence. It is presence, waiting. What sleeps beneath the Pacific is not inert. It is charged with meaning, a story compressed into stone. The moment it rises into light, that story will become part of ours. And then the question will press harder. What do we do with what we learn? There is a tension in that thought, one I cannot shake, because fragments can carry more than atoms. They can carry perspective, the kind that unsettles the foundations of certainty. If the meteor proves that matter from another system can reach us, then life itself may not be confined to the narrow cradle of Earth. Perhaps life, like stone, like dust, like fireballs, is restless, drifting across the galaxy. If so, then we are not a singular accident, but one verse in a song far older and wider than we can imagine. To accept that truth would mean reshaping everything we think about beginnings, about endings, about purpose. And yet, there is a darker side to perspective. For what if the fragments speak of ruin? What if their elements reveal a history of destruction, worlds undone by collisions, systems scarred by forces beyond comprehension? To study them may be to stare into a mirror that shows not only what we are, but what we may become. Earth, too, is fragile, its safety temporary, its future uncertain. The fireball of 2014 may be less a message of kinship than a reminder of mortality, ours and that of our world. I cannot help but picture the scientists who might one day stand in their laboratories, holding those fragments under glass. Some will feel triumph, some will feel awe, and some, I think, will feel unease. A quiet dread that what they hold is not just knowledge but prophecy. The ocean's silence may have been shielding us not only from discovery, but from the weight of what discovery means. For sometimes the silence of the universe is a kindness, and when it ends, kindness ends with it. Still, humanity has never turned away from the abyss. We climb into it willingly, searching for answers even when the answers unsettle us. That is why ships will launch, why expeditions will drag magnets across the seafloor, why fragments will be sifted from mud and silt. Because silence cannot keep us forever. Our nature is to ask, to disturb, to demand. And when we finally lift what the ocean guards, we will do so knowing that silence, once broken, can never return. The Pacific waits, infinite and patient. But the patience of the sea is not eternal. And when the silence is finally shattered, the question will not only be what we find, but whether we will be able to live with what we hear. That question feels heavier than any stone lying beneath the sea. Because fragments are not only fragments, they are voices, and voices always say something. To recover a piece of the CNEOS 2014 meteor is to invite the cosmos into our lives, and once invited, it cannot be dismissed. What we learn may not be gentle, it may not be kind. It may demand of us a reckoning with truths we have long tried to avoid. For what could those truths be? That life is not rare but common, drifting from world to world on fragments of rock. That destruction is inevitable, that every system ends in silence. Or worse still, that we are not unique, not even in our fragility, but merely one among countless others who have risen, struggled, and fallen before us. Each possibility forces us to confront our illusions, and illusions, once broken, cannot be restored. The thought unsettles me most when I picture the seabed itself, a flat expanse of darkness, silt drifting like dust in a forgotten room, currents whispering across ancient plains. Somewhere in that silence lie the beads of molten metal, hardened in their fiery descent. They wait without knowing they wait, passive but charged with meaning. To lift them is to disturb not only the ocean's stillness, but the fragile stillness within ourselves. For in them lies perspective, and perspective never leaves us unchanged. I think again of the people who first witnessed the fireball, the villagers on Manus Island. To them it was a blaze, a roar, a fading trail. They returned to their homes and slept beneath the same stars, never realizing the enormity of what they had seen. And yet perhaps that is the truest form of wisdom, to witness without needing to interpret, to let the mystery remain mystery. Scientists will dissect, philosophers will debate, storytellers will wonder. But those villagers saw, and seeing alone may be enough. It reminds me that sometimes the greatest encounters are not those explained, but those experienced. Still, humanity cannot stop at wonder. We are restless, insatiable. We will send ships, drag nets, sift through mud in search of fragments too small to see with the eye. We will analyse them, catalogue them, measure their isotopes. But in the end, what will we have? Stones or truths? The answer depends not on what the fragments are, but on what we are willing to see in them. And what if we see too much? What if a fragment reveals something not natural at all? A structure, a symmetry, a pattern too deliberate to dismiss. That possibility lingers like a shadow, terrifying and irresistible. Because if the fragments contain even a hint of intention, then the silence of the Pacific has been concealing not just a meteor, but a message. And if there is a message, then someone or something once sent it. The implications are too large for me to hold in my thoughts for long. Yet even without intention, the fragments already speak. They tell us we are not separate, that the galaxy touches us whether we acknowledge it or not. They remind us that Earth is not the centre, but part of a current far larger than itself. They whisper of other stars, other systems, other places where matter once lived and died. That is enough to unsettle and enough to inspire. The silence of the Pacific remains, vast and unbroken. But one day it will yield, and when it does, the question will press more urgently than ever. Not whether the fragments are from another world, but what kind of world they will make of us once we hold them. That thought pierces deeper than the fireball's descent itself, because fragments are never only about their origin, they are about their impact on those who find them. To lift a stone from the abyss is to lift a mirror, and mirrors never lie. The meteor's remnants will not only tell us where they came from, they will tell us who we are in the face of the unknown. And who are we? A species forever torn between awe and fear. We gaze at the stars with longing, yet we tremble when they send something back to us. We crave knowledge, yet fear what knowledge will reveal. The fireball of 2014 forced us into that tension, a reminder that discovery is never without cost. For every truth gained, something else is lost. Certainty, comfort, illusion. The silence of the Pacific is heavy not because it conceals fragments, but because it conceals the weight of change that fragments carry. I cannot shake the image of the seabed, vast, dark, unbroken, like an unopened book resting on the ocean floor. The pages are written in metal and stone. The ink is isotopes, the story older than Earth itself. To open that book is to read of suns we will never see, of systems long gone, of collisions that echo across time. But to read it also means confronting our place in the story, and that place may be smaller, more fragile, more fleeting than we dare to admit. Still, there is beauty in fragility. To be fleeting is not to be meaningless. Perhaps the meteor came to remind us of that impermanence itself is a form of belonging, that the cosmos is not built on permanence but on cycles of creation and destruction. To hold a fragment from another system is to touch a survivor of that cycle, to see in its scars the memory of catastrophe and endurance alike. And in its endurance we may find a reflection of our own. But then a darker possibility rises. What if the fragments are not simply survivors but warnings? What if they carry within them traces of forces too violent to imagine? Worlds ripped apart, atmospheres stripped away, stars devouring their children? If so, then the meteor was not just a visitor, but a herald, whispering of fates that could one day be ours. The silence of the Pacific then becomes more than patience. It becomes judgment, as if the ocean itself asks whether we are ready to know what lies ahead. This thought troubles me most when I picture the first fragment lifted into human hands, a bead of metal, small, unremarkable to the eye, yet carrying within it the voice of a system older than ours. Scientists will measure it, weigh it, analyse it, but in truth it will be measuring us. It will test our humility, our capacity to face truths that extend beyond comfort. Will we see in it only data, or will we see in it ourselves? Small, brief, yet part of something vast. Perhaps that is why the meteor fell where it did, into the silence of the ocean. The sea is the only place vast enough, patient enough, to guard such truths until we are ready. The land could not have kept the fragments safe. Human hands would have disturbed them too quickly. But the ocean, endless and unyielding, held them close, cradling them in darkness until we grew restless enough to seek them. And now we stand on the edge of that seeking, uncertain of what we will find, but unable to turn back. For once silence is broken, there is no return to our knowing. There is only the weight of the fragments, and the question they place before us, not where they came from, but who we choose to become once they are ours. That weight is invisible now, but it grows heavier with every passing year. For the longer the fragments lie beneath the Pacific, the more they transform in our imagination. They are no longer only droplets of stone and metal. They have become symbols, anchors for questions about our place in the cosmos, about what it means to be human in a universe that sends us reminders of its immensity. Symbols are dangerous, though. They ignite not only curiosity but also conflict, if the fragments are ever retrieved, whose hands will hold them first. Which nation, which people will claim them as their discovery, their property, their proof? The cosmos does not recognise borders, but humans do. A fireball from another system may end up sparking arguments not about science, but about ownership, power and pride. And in those arguments, I see a reflection of our deepest weakness, the inability to see beyond ourselves, even when holding a gift from beyond the stars. Yet perhaps the fragments themselves will resist such pettiness, for their story cannot be owned. They are older than any nation, older than Earth itself, older perhaps than the sun. To lift one is to hold in your hand not possession, but humility. It will not bend to our flags or our claims. It will remain what it has always been, a traveller, indifferent to human quarrels, carrying within it the quiet memory of a system we will never see. And that indifference may be the greatest lesson of all. Still, I fear what the discovery might unleash within us. Knowledge can inspire, but it can also divide. Some will see the fragments as proof of life's universality. Others will see them as threats, reminders of fragility. Some will be filled with awe, others with dread. A single fireball may fracture humanity as much as it unites it. And perhaps that is the true test. Not whether we can recover the fragments, but whether we can face them together. I think often of the night sky as a canvas of reminders. Every star is both a beacon and a silence. Some have burned for billions of years, sending light across gulfs of time to reach us now. Others have already died, their messages still travelling, unaware their sources are gone. The 2014 meteor was like one of those messages, but written not in light but in fire. It crossed the sky and was gone, but the fragments remain, carrying their silence beneath the sea. The question is whether we are willing to read them, and whether we can accept what they tell us without twisting it to fit our fears or ambitions. The Pacific is patient, but patience is not endless. One day the silence will break and the fragments will rise. They will tell us of stars long gone, of systems destroyed, of journeys beyond measure. They may even whisper of life or the potential for it scattered across the galaxy like seeds in the wind. But what they will say most clearly is that we are not alone. Not in danger, not in wonder, not in destiny. We are part of a pattern too vast to deny, and yet the pattern itself may not comfort us. For if the fragments remind us of our connection, they also remind us of our impermanence. To touch them is to touch mortality, not just of ourselves, but of our world. Perhaps that is why the silence feels so heavy. It knows the truth it guards is both gift and burden. The abyss waits, still and unbroken, and when its silence ends, humanity will face not only the voice of another world, but the echo of its own. That echo is what I fear most, not what the fragments will tell us of distant stars, but what they will reveal about ourselves. For the meteor's descent was not only a cosmic event, it was a mirror held briefly to our sky, now buried in the deep. When it rises again, so will the questions we have avoided. Are we seekers of truth, or are we prisoners of fear? Do we face the universe with open hands, or do we shrink from it, clutching at illusions of safety? I imagine the first time a human hand touches one of those fragments. It will be a moment both intimate and immense, the quiet weight of metal and stone in a palm, the unspoken knowledge that this object has travelled across gulfs our machines may never cross. It will be older than every city, older than every empire, older than Earth itself. To hold it is to hold history that is not ours, but which has now chosen to intersect with ours. And in that intersection, we will have to choose what kind of species we want to be. The danger is not only in what the fragments reveal, but in how we respond to them. If we see them as trophies, we will reduce them to symbols of pride and power. If we see them as threats, we may hide them away, pretending they never fell. But if we see them as they truly are, messengers from beyond, then perhaps we will begin to act differently, to see ourselves not as rulers of Earth, but as participants in a vast shared cosmos. That shift is not easy, it demands humility, and humility is rare. And yet, humility may be the only path forward. The fireball of 2014 reminded us that the universe does not ask permission. It does not wait for us to be ready. It brushes against us without warning, leaving traces in our sky, in our seas, in our imagination. We cannot stop it. We cannot control it. But we can listen. We can choose to let the silence teach us. And if we do, perhaps the fragments will give us more than knowledge. They will give us perspective. Perspective, however, is dangerous too, for perspective is not always comforting. To know that matter from other systems reaches us is to know that we are not isolated. To know that destruction is common is to know that we are not safe. To know that life may be scattered across the stars is to know that we are not unique. Each of these truths has the power to unmake the stories we have told ourselves for centuries, and yet each of them may also free us, if we allow it. Sometimes I wonder if the meteor's true meaning is not in the fragments at all, but in the fireball itself. A moment of light across the Pacific witnessed by a handful of people, recorded by instruments, later confirmed by science. Perhaps the meteor's greatest gift was not what it left behind, but what it showed us in that instant, that the infinite is not far away. It can burn above us without warning, dazzling and terrifying, reminding us that the universe is always closer than we think. But still, the fragments wait, patient in the abyss. They are more than symbols, more than science, more than stone. They are a question buried in the deep. Who will we become when we finally claim them? That is the echo we will face, the echo not of another world, but of our own, reverberating back at us through silence, through fire, through time. That echo is not something we can escape. It is stitched into the very nature of discovery. For every revelation about the cosmos is also a revelation about ourselves. The meteor is no exception. Its fragments will not only tell us of distant systems, but of the fragile balance within us, between wonder and fear, between humility and pride, between unity and division. I often wonder whether the ocean knows what it keeps. Of course, the sea does not think as we do, yet its silence feels deliberate, almost protective. It has guarded shipwrecks, civilizations, the bones of creatures long extinct, all hidden beneath its dark veil. Now it guards something older still, the memory of another star. To dive into that abyss is to trespass into a sanctuary not meant for easy hands. Perhaps that is why the silence feels so immense. It is the silence of guardianship, as though the Pacific itself is waiting to see whether we are worthy of what we seek. And worthiness, I fear, is not guaranteed. We live in a world fractured by rivalry, distracted by trivialities, too quick to seize and too slow to reflect. If fragments from another star rise into such a world, how will we treat them? Will they become another possession, another prize to hoard? Or will they become what they truly are? Reminders that none of our quarrels matter when set against the span of billions of years and the vastness of the galaxy. The answer rests not in the fragments themselves, but in us. Still, I cannot deny the hope that flickers within me. Perhaps these fragments will awaken something long dormant in us, a deeper sense of kinship, not only with each other, but with the universe itself. Imagine holding in your hand a bead of metal formed in the furnace of a star no human eye has ever seen. Imagine knowing that this fragment has travelled across gulfs of space, surviving collisions, silence and time, only to end its journey here on our fragile world. Such knowledge could strip away the illusions that divide us and replace them with awe, with reverence, with perspective. Yet awe is not always enough. It fades, replaced by routine, dulled by familiarity. That is the danger of discovery. What first inspires wonder eventually becomes ordinary. Will the fragments, once recovered, be reduced to specimens in drawers, labelled, catalogued, forgotten? Or will they continue to speak, even in silence, reminding us of the journey they endured to reach us? The choice is ours, to keep listening or to let the silence return deeper than before. Perhaps that is why I sometimes think the meteor itself was less about what it carried and more about what it asked of us. It was a question written in fire across the sky. Are you ready to see yourselves not as isolated, but as part of a story older than your world? The fragments are only the punctuation to that question, lying quiet beneath the sea. To answer it, we must first decide whether we are willing to face the truth of our own smallness. The silence of the Pacific is patient but not eternal. One day, it will break, and when it does, the echo we hear will not only come from the stars, but from within ourselves. For the fragments will not simply tell us where they came from, they will tell us who we must become. That sentence circles in my mind like a tide, returning again and again, refusing to fade. Because identity is never static. It bends, reshapes, breaks, and rebuilds with every encounter, every revelation. The meteor of 2014 was not just an object. It was an invitation to transformation. And if we accept it, then the fragments will not be stones in our hands, but catalysts urging us toward a future we do not yet recognize. What future might that be? Perhaps one of unity, where humanity sees itself not as divided tribes, but as a single species standing at the edge of the infinite. The fragments could become a symbol of kinship, proof that the universe touches us all, regardless of borders, languages, or histories. To hold them could mean to remember that we are part of something greater than our conflicts. But the opposite is just as possible. They could become another object of division, fought over, claimed, hoarded. The cosmos offers us its silence, but it is up to us whether we hear harmony or discord within it. I cannot help but think that the meteor tested us long before we touched its remains. It fell not in a laboratory, but above the open sea, where ordinary people saw its light. For them, it was beauty, fleeting and unexplainable. For scientists, it became data, measurements, equations. For dreamers, it became a symbol. In that division lies the essence of who we are. We interpret the same fireball in countless ways. The fragments will deepen that division, or, if we allow it, they may dissolve it. The sea has always been a place of transformation. Sailors returned from it changed, carrying stories of horizons they never expected. Civilizations rose and fell by its tides, and now it holds within it not just the memory of our own journeys, but the memory of another star's. When we retrieve the fragments, we will not only pull from the ocean, we will pull from ourselves, dredging up questions too heavy to ignore. What is life? What is time? What is our role in a universe that scatters stones across light years, only to have them fall into our sky? Perhaps the truest danger lies not in the answers, but in the silence after the answers are spoken. Because once we know, once the fragments reveal their truths, there may be nothing left to hide behind. If they prove that life's building blocks drift freely across the galaxy, then we must admit we are not unique. If they prove that destruction is common, then we must admit we are not safe. And if they prove nothing at all, if they are only stones, ordinary and mute, then we must admit that meaning comes not from the cosmos, but from ourselves. Each outcome is heavy. Each outcome transforms us. The meteor itself was a flash, a moment of brilliance swallowed by night. But its echo is long, stretching across years, across imaginations, across the silence of the Pacific. The fragments are not only remnants of that fire, they are remnants of possibility. What we make of them will determine whether the meteor was simply an accident or the first chapter of a new story. The Pacific waits still, its silence thick and patient. But patience has its limits, even for the sea. One day the fragments will rise, and with them a choice, to remain as we are or to become something new. And when that day comes, the silence will not end with answers, it will end with us. That thought coils around me, chilling, because endings are not always destruction. Sometimes they are transformations so complete that the old self cannot survive. The fragments beneath the Pacific may not destroy humanity, but they may end the version of humanity we have always known. For once we face the truths they hold, we may never see ourselves, or our universe, the same way again. It is easy to think of the meteor as an accident, a stray stone flung from a distant system. But what if it was more than that? What if it was not chance, but intention? The possibility presses in, impossible to dismiss entirely. A structure hidden in the fragments, a composition too deliberate, a signal etched into the very matter itself. If such a thing were found, it would overturn everything. Not merely science, but history, belief, identity. For then the meteor would not just be a visitor, it would be a message, not silence, but warning. Warnings can be subtle, delivered in whispers rather than shouts. A fragment that speaks of a shattered planet might carry with it the memory of what destroyed it. A pattern in its isotopes might reveal that stars are not eternal guardians, but treacherous hosts. Or perhaps the warning is simpler still, that nothing in the universe lasts forever, and that our turn will come. If so, then the fireball of 2014 was not a gift, but a prophecy written in light, falling across the Pacific as a reminder that all worlds meet their end. I imagine the moment of revelation, the instant someone realizes what the fragments truly mean. Perhaps it will come late at night, in a quiet laboratory, a scientist staring at results that cannot be explained away. Perhaps it will come at sea, a diva surfacing with a piece of stone that gleams too strangely in the light. Or perhaps it will come in silence, the kind of silence that spreads not because nothing is said, but because the truth is too heavy to speak aloud. Whatever form it takes, that moment will divide time, before the meteor and after it. What frightens me most is not that the fragments may reveal something alien, but that they may reveal something familiar, that what befell other systems is what awaits us, that extinction is not an anomaly, but a law. To hold such a fragment would be to hold a mirror of our own fate. Could we live with that? Could we look into that mirror and continue on as if nothing had changed? Or would we collapse beneath the weight of inevitability? Yet warnings are not curses. They are also chances. If the fragments tell us of destruction, they may also give us time. Time to prepare, time to change, time to see ourselves not as victims of the cosmos, but as stewards of our fragile world. Perhaps that is the true gift of the meteor, not to frighten us, but to awaken us, to remind us that survival is not guaranteed, that vigilance is not optional, that wonder must be paired with responsibility. And so I return to the silence of the Pacific, heavy, unbroken, waiting. Beneath it lies the choice, to dismiss, to deny, to reduce the meteor to stone, or to listen, to learn, to accept that it may be more than we ever imagined. The fireball was not only light in the sky, it was a question. The fragments are its answer. And if that answer is a warning, then it was never meant to end with the stars. It was meant to end with us. The words echo in my mind like waves striking the shore at night, each return softer yet deeper, carrying with it an unsettling finality. If the meteor was a warning, then it was not cast randomly into the void. It found us because we were meant to hear it, and hearing changes everything. The silence that followed its fall is not the silence of absence, but the silence of expectation, as though the cosmos itself is waiting to see how we will respond. I walk through this thought like through a dim corridor, walls lined with shadows of questions. What does it mean to be warned by the universe? Are we its children, loved enough to be cautioned? Or its accidents, brushed by chance into our awareness of our own fragility? Either answer unsettles, for both strip us of the illusion of control. We're not masters here. We're participants in a story too vast to write ourselves. Perhaps that is why the fragments remain where they are, guarded by the ocean. They wait until we are ready not to claim them, but to understand them. Readiness is not measured in technology or science alone. It is measured in humility, in the willingness to accept truths that may make us smaller, but also more connected. The meteor was not ours. It was part of another world, another star, another history. And yet, by falling here, It became part of ours too. We cannot erase that. We can only decide whether to meet it with reverence or with greed. When I imagine the moment of recovery, I do not see triumph. I see stillness. A fragment lifted from the mud, held beneath light that has never touched it before. Around it, silence. Not the silence of the sea, but the silence of awe, or of realization. In that instant, the fragment will no longer be just a piece of metal. It will be a bridge, connecting Earth to a star we may never name, to a history we will never fully know. To cross that bridge is to step into a future where the universe is no longer distant, but immediate, intimate, undeniable. And yet, I wonder if we will hear the warning within it. Humanity is skilled at forgetting what does not suit us. We turn signs into noise, burdens into trophies, truths into stories that flatter rather than challenge. If the meteor speaks of fragility, will we listen? Or will we dismiss it as we have dismissed so many warnings before? If it speaks of possibility, will we seize it? Or will we let it fade into routine, the extraordinary reduced to the ordinary? The silence of the Pacific will not answer for us. It will only deliver the fragments. The rest is ours. What lingers most is not fear, but reflection. For the meteor, whether warning or gift, reminds us that we are not alone. Not in wonder, not in peril, not in time. We are part of a cycle older than memory, older than history, older even than Earth itself. To hold a fragment is to touch that cycle, to feel its weight pressing through the ages, and in that touch perhaps lies the chance to see ourselves anew, not as fragile accidents, but as fragile participants in something vast and beautiful. The silence has not yet broken. The fragments remain in darkness, but their presence is enough. Already they have changed us, not by speaking, but by existing. And perhaps that is their greatest gift, that they force us to listen, to wonder, to ask who we are, even before we touch them. That thought lingers like the afterglow of the fireball itself, suspended above the Pacific in memory, refusing to fade. For the truth is that the meteor did not need to speak aloud to alter us. Its silence was enough. Its fall was enough. By burning briefly in our sky and then vanishing into the deep, it carved a question into the heart of humanity, one that no discovery will ever fully erase. We live in the shadow of that question now. The fragments still rest at the bottom of the sea, but their weight has already pressed upon us, forcing us to confront what it means to be part of a universe that sends such reminders. We are no longer allowed to pretend that Earth is untouched, that the stars are distant, that the void is silent. The void has spoken, in fire, in silence, in fragments hidden in the abyss, and one day soon we must answer. Perhaps the answer will be found in science, in isotopes and alloys and charts of trajectories. Perhaps it will be found in philosophy, in the quiet acceptance of our place in something larger than we can comprehend. Or perhaps the answer will never be final, never complete, only a story we continue to tell, a story that shapes us more with each retelling. For what is humanity if not a species of storytellers? Weaving meaning into the fragments the universe casts our way. And so we return to the night of 2014, when the fireball lit the skies above Manus Island. Those who saw it did not know they were witnessing history. They only knew they were watching light blaze across the heavens, fierce and fleeting. But sometimes history begins not with knowledge, but with wonder, and perhaps that is the meteor's final gift, to remind us that wonder is not childish, not trivial. It is the beginning of all understanding. If the fragments are ever raised, they will not close the story. They will open it wider. They will lead to more questions, more mysteries, more echoes waiting to be heard. For every stone carries not only the memory of its origin, but the promise of its future. And when we touch them, we become part of that promise. So I leave you with this. If the meteor was a warning, what do you believe it was warning us of? if it was a gift? What kind of gift could the universe send in silence, carried on fire? And if it was only chance, only stone, only fire, why does it still haunt us years later, as though it were more? Could our own cities someday fall to silence as completely as the worlds that may have birthed these fragments? Could Earth itself one day become the source of a fireball streaking into another sky, a message misunderstood, a silence waiting to be broken? And if so, when that day comes, what story will we have left behind for others to find? Share your thoughts below, and if you're new here, subscribe to Planet Echoes, because the silence of the universe will not last forever, and together we can be ready to listen when it finally speaks again.